Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD News. I'm Alina Weiskup. Emotional scenes today showing the real-life impact of illegal immigration at a congressional hearing. Meanwhile, a group of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle have come together to introduce an immigration reform bill. NTD's Arian Pazdar has the latest on border policy.
If we had stricter border policies, my daughter would still be alive today. Nothing will bring my daughter back.
Tammy Nobles is the mother of Kayla Hamilton. Kayla was allegedly murdered by an MS-13 gang member who entered the country illegally. At a Tuesday hearing, Nobles told the story of how someone entered her daughter's home last year and strangled her to death.
The murderer then violently sexually assaulted Kayla. Kayla's boyfriend came home from work and found her dead on the floor.
A report released by the House Judiciary Committee on Tuesday found that years before coming to the U.S., the alien charged with Kayla's murder was arrested in El Salvador for illicit association with the dangerous MS-13 gang.
We need to properly vet all border crossers. The government could have placed a phone call to authorities in El Salvador and found out that he was a gang member, but they didn't.
Republicans at the hearing called for stricter controls and more vetting at the border. Democrats doubled down on processing centers in Latin American countries. This way, migrants could seek asylum and be vetted while still in their home country. Also on Tuesday, a group of bipartisan lawmakers introduced what they call
the first complete bipartisan immigration reform law in the last 10 years.
Republican Congresswoman Maria Salazar says the so-called Dignity Act aims to give more funding to Border Patrol as well as supply technology, create humanitarian campuses along the border where migrants would receive an asylum decision within 60 days, require the use of E-Verify, an online system that checks whether an employee is legally authorized to work, fund processing centers in Latin America for migrants to seek asylum, and make more green cards and visas available. However, the bill is not expected to pass, as House Republicans said they first want to increase security at the border before passing immigration reform. Meanwhile, House Republicans on Tuesday said the Halt Fentanyl Act will be introduced this week. Lawmakers say it would
supply law enforcement with the tools needed to keep fentanyl off our streets.
The White House this week welcoming the decision, saying the act aims at things which the administration has long supported. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
Families torn apart. How a brutal suppression of faith in China has changed the lives of millions, including ones here in the United States. NTD's Iris Tao has more on a congressional briefing today.
At a congressional hearing, we heard from several U.S. residents whose family members are being persecuted in China because of their faith. Let's take a listen.
10 years ago, my mom was behind the bars, and my father was trying his best to save my mom. And 10 years later, my father is behind bars. My mom and I are trying our best to save my father.
Joe Yo is an engineer and a popular YouTuber living here in the U.S. His dad was recently sentenced to 8 years in prison for practicing Falun Gong, a meditation practice based on the values of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. But the Chinese Communist Party deemed the practice's popularity a threat, and it launched a campaign of persecution that's led to millions being detained and tortured throughout the past 2 decades.
So please help my father and help the people under the persecution in China.
And he's not the only one. Lydia Wang wants to rescue her mom, who was arrested 11 times in China for holding on to her faith.
She has suffered for 24 years under the CCP's persecution and has been in prison over 10 years since 1999. We would like to bring her home to New York.
And this New York-based architect wanted to bring her mom to the States, but would never get a chance as his mom died this March after being detained.
Truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. She refused to give them up even in the face of physical and mental torture by the communist regime.
And this is not something that just affects people in China.
And Congressman Gus Bilirakis of Florida, who convened this briefing, calls on the U.S. Congress to do more to help.
No person should ever be intimidated, forced from their ancestral homeland, imprisoned, or murdered simply because of their beliefs. We've just begun to fight.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Now we welcome to the show Brandon Tatum, commentator, radio host, and former police officer. Tatum co-founded the Blexit Foundation with Candace Owens. It's a movement that stands for Black Exit and aims to counter victimhood mentality among Black Americans. Tatum shares with NTD's Steve Lance what the movement has done and what he thinks are some of the biggest challenges that minority communities face.
Brandon Tatum, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
If you could just tell us a little bit about Blexit and its mission to advance youth in urban and minority communities.
So Candace Owens and I'm sure you may know who she is. she's incredibly popular. If you don't know, you must be sleeping on a rock. But Candace and I in 2018, we started Blexit because it's interesting because I would argue our situation is very similar. Growing up Black in America, you have a very similar perspective as most Black people. Not everybody's the same, but it's a very similar shared experience. So we were both taught that we were on the left, that we were Democrats. And over time, we started to realize that it has all been a myth, as if we've been lied to. And it really, I would say garnished a lot of enthusiasm for us to go out and reach other Black people to try to inform them and give them a fair, balanced decision-making opportunity. And so we started in 2018, and our mission was to get Black people off the proverbial plantation through education and empowerment. And so that's what we've been able to do over the last several years. And we just partnered with Turning Point USA, and now we are Turning Point USA and Blexit. We've come together as one. But over the years before the merger this year, we have chapters. We've gotten over, I think, 48 chapters in each state. So we're in 48 states, and we've been able to go out in the community and not only use words, but also use action. We go out, we do back to school drives, we do barbecues and do things in the community to give back. We do things for pro-police. We have pro-police opportunities where we do back to blue events and different things like that. So that's pretty much the gist of what we do with Blexit, and it's been incredibly successful. But we look forward to exponential growth here moving forward because we really think it's invaluable that young people get the opportunity to hear the truth and then make a proper decision from there.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges facing, these underserved communities, and what are some of the solutions, and how do you view it in terms of faith?
Yeah, the lack of God and perspective are the two things that I see that plagued me when I was a young man, and I see it playing out today. I think that in these underserved communities, these inner city communities, these minority communities, there needs to be a revival of connecting with God again. When I was growing up, I feel like we had a closer connection. Even before that, it was even closer to going to church and understanding biblical principle and knowing the power of prayer and principle. Because now marriage is just a thought in the wind somewhere. It's not rooted in the foundation of our experience in these cities, because no matter how much money you make, you can still carry the principles of God and say, you know what, I'm gonna be married and have children and be fruitful. And that perspective have gone by the wayside. And then also leaders that are in the community are failing us through perspective. Walking around with a lens of victimhood is not conducive for anybody. And I think that the solution to these problems is that if we can get God interjected back into our society, well, let me rephrase that, because God is already there. We just need to re-engage with God that's already in our community. And then if we can get our leaders to start being honest and truthful about our affairs in the inner city, we will do better. And I'll say this too, I'll add that not only are the current leaders need to change, but we need emerging leaders to come behind them and be truthful and honest and really build the community through the proper American dream perspective.
Let me get your thoughts on America's founding, and how significant are the principles of freedom of belief and freedom of religion?
Well, I think that those are very important. Our founding is very important and essential to why I'm here today. We not too long ago in our country's history, the Black people were slaves. But the truth of the matter is that the founding fathers put in provisions that always gave the open door for people to be free in this country. And that's how we've seen the abolishment of slavery and equality that we've seen throughout our country that's very unique than other countries. People like to criticize America, but I think we're the most diverse and the most accepting country in the world. And I'll add to this, maybe to our detriment at times, but we are the most graceful. But those provisions were put in place a long time ago to allow for that freedom to exist. So I think the founding fathers, although they weren't perfect, and nobody can name a single society that came from perfection. I mean, we've been struggling as humanity all the way from biblical times, even before that. I think that our founding fathers had a level of God in them that gave them a limited perspective to put in these provisions that they may not have been aware that they will be fruitful moving forward. So,
Brandon Tatum, thank you so much.
God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.